Guadalcanal, August 1942. Jungle so thick you can't see 10 feet. Heat so heavy it feels like breathing through a wet blanket. And the best riflemen in the world are going into it carrying a rifle their grandfathers used in 1918.
Army gets new stuff and we fight with my grandfather used.
Not because they had to, because they chose to. While the Army was fielding what General Patton would call the greatest battle implement ever devised, while German soldiers in Normandy were writing after-action reports about American fire, they described as a continuous wall of lead with no pause for bolt manipulation, the United States Marine Corps looked at that rifle and said, "Not for us, 0 M1 Garands." That's what the 1st, 5th, and 7th Marine Regiments took ashore at Guadalcanal. Not a shortage, not a shipping delay. 0. The equipment logs are in the National Archives right now. NARA Record Group 127. Go look. And before anyone in the comments tells me Marines always love the Garand, I have the equipment logs. Keep watching. So why? Why would the most elite infantry force in the American military reject the rifle that was winning the war? The answer involves a failed engineering test, a cultural identity built around a bolt action, and combat doctrine that was both completely logical and completely wrong. And it starts 4 years before Guadalcanal, with 400 rifles that jammed. Here's the part that never makes it into the documentaries. In late 1938, the Marine Corps received 400 M1 Garands for testing, and those rifles failed. Not because the Marines were biased against them, because the rifles actually failed. The early M1 used what's called a gas trap design, propellant gas captured at the muzzle tip rather than through a port drilled into the barrel. On a clean rifle, in controlled conditions, it worked. In field use, carbon fouling built up fast. Reliability dropped hard. And when Marine testers ran those 400 rifles through evaluation, the results were bad enough that USMC procurement records from 1938 through 1942, detailed in American Rifleman's piece, Marines in the M1 Garand, the first 400, show the Corps assigned them to defense battalions, shore gun crews, not the men storming beaches. The Army had already fixed the problem by 1940, switching to a gas port drilled directly into the barrel, far more reliable, far cleaner. But Marine brass didn't see the fixed rifle. They saw the broken one, and institutional memory doesn't update on a spec sheet, it updates on experience. Those 400 fouled rifles became 4 years of distrust baked into procurement culture. But here's what that distrust alone cannot explain. Plenty of weapons fail early tests and get adopted anyway once the fix is verified. The gas trap explains why Marines were skeptical. It does not explain why they chose to go to war without the Garand even after it was fixed. That decision came from something much harder to repair than a fouled gas system. It came from who Marines believed they were. You probably think Marine resistance to the M1 was stubbornness, that the Corps was tradition-obsessed and slow to modernize. Here's what the records actually show, and it's a more interesting story than stubbornness. Marines built their entire identity around the M1903 Springfield, marksmanship badges, expert qualifications, deliberate, aimed fire at distance, 1 round, 1 confirmed hit. That wasn't just a preference, it was doctrine and self-definition. And when USMC infantry, marksmanship, and ordnance officers ran formal comparative tests in 1940 and 1941, pitting the M1 Garand against the M1903, the M1903 won on accuracy. The Garand won on overall combat performance. Marines chose the M1903 anyway, because for their doctrine, precision mattered more than volume. That decision is in 1941 USMC Ordnance Correspondence, referenced in WWII.com's thread on Marine adoption debates. It wasn't stubbornness. It was a calculated choice based on everything they knew. And honestly, if you were a Marine in 1940, if someone handed you a rifle that jammed in your last test and told you to trust it with your life in a Pacific jungle, you would have said no too. That's not stubbornness. That's survival instinct. The men making that call weren't wrong with the information they had. They were wrong about what the war would actually require, and they were about to find that out the hard way. If you're the kind of person who wants the history that goes deeper than the quote, that follows the documents instead of the legend, hit subscribe. This channel exists for exactly that. Now here's where the myth-busting starts, because this is the exact moment in every Garand video where the ping story gets inserted. And I want to deal with it right now before it distracts from the real story. You've probably heard that the M1's on-block clip made a distinctive metallic ping when it ejected, and that in the silence of Pacific jungles, that sound gave away Marine positions and got men killed. Here's what the evidence says. According to veteran interviews cited in the Wikipedia M1 Garand article, German soldiers in Normandy reported the ping was completely inaudible during actual engagements. Combat noise swallowed it entirely. And according to SWAT magazine's South Pacific Shootout M1903 Springfield vs. M1 Garand, there are 0 documented Marine complaints about the ping in Pacific combat accounts. 0. The real concern in close-quarters jungle fighting was the 8-round limit. Running dry mid-bonsai charge. That's a magazine problem, not a sound problem. The ping myth is exactly that, a myth. The receipt says so. Let's move on. August 7th, 1942. 1st Marine Division hits the beach. The man next to you is working a bolt, the same action his father worked in 1918. On the other side of the world, an Army GY in England is loading an 8-round in-block clip into a rifle that loads itself. He can fire 40 rounds a minute. You can fire 15. In a 2-minute firefight, he puts 80 rounds downrange. You put 30. 0 M1 Garands in the 1st, 5th, and 7th Marine Regiments. The only M1s on the island were 250 rifles in the 3rd Defense Battalion. Shore gun crews, not infantry. By November 1942, the 2nd Marine Division had exactly 5 M1 Garands in reserve. 5. Total USMC inventory by end of fiscal year 1942 was 62,886 Garands, and the policy excluding frontline infantry from new weapons mid-overseas deployment meant virtually none of them reached the men who needed them most. All of this is in NARA Record Group 127, the Guadalcanal equipment logs, primary source, not forum speculation. Meanwhile, in Normandy 2 years later, a German after-action report from the European Theater, 1944, described American infantry as maintaining continuous rifle fire while advancing, no pause for bolt manipulation observed. Fire volume exceeds machine gun positions. Germans were firing 15 aimed rounds per minute. Americans were firing 30 to 40. That gap wasn't a tactical advantage. It was a different category of weapon in the same caliber. Marines on Guadalcanal knew none of that yet. They were learning it in real time, in the dark, in the mud, with a bolt action. But a small number of Marines on that island did have M1s. And those men were paying attention. Their reports would change everything. But the nature of that change, and who drove it, is not the story you've been told. Picture a Marine raider on Guadalcanal. He has one of the 250 M1 Garands on the island. A bonsai charge hits his position at 2 a.m. He fires 8 rounds, reloads, fires 8 more. The man next to him with a Springfield fires 4. Both positions hold, but the raider's report goes up the chain. And that report, multiplied by every early M1 user in the defense battalions and the raider units, starts changing the institutional math. The Marine Corps Association article, "This is My Rifle, M1 Garand," published April 5, 2022, citing early Pacific combat trials, is direct. The Corps formally adopted the Garand to completely replace the M1903 because of positive combat feedback from Marines who had used it. Not Army pressure, not War Department mandates. Their own men, in their own fight, sending back reports that said, this works. The formal adoption date was February 1st, 1941, before Guadalcanal, but the allocation numbers tell the story of the actual transition. Starting January 1943, the Army allocation to Marines jumped to 22,000 Garands per month. By Tarawa, by Bougainville, by Iwo Jima, Marines weren't just carrying M1s. They were requesting more. The rifle they'd rejected in 1938, left on the dock in 1942, couldn't be delivered fast enough by 1943. Now, Myth bust number 2. Because here's where most tellings get it wrong. They frame the Marine Corps as stubborn dinosaurs dragged into the modern era. But look at the actual sequence. Marines tested a broken rifle, reasonably concluded it was unreliable, watched it get fixed, but had no combat confirmation from their own people in their own terrain. Combat confirmation arrived from Guadalcanal. Marines responded immediately. 22,000 rifles a month. That is not an institution resisting progress. That is an institution requiring evidence before committing lives to a new system. The distinction matters. According to USMC adoption records cited on usmcweaponry.com, every step of this process was documented, deliberate, and driven by their own combat data. This is what history with receipts actually means. Not the legend, not the mythology, but the document trail that shows you how decisions actually got made. If that's your kind of history, you know what to do. The evidence versus emotion question is settled, but there is still one more layer here. Because even with full M1 adoption, the Marine Corps was using that rifle in a fundamentally different fight than the Army in Europe. And understanding that difference is what makes the whole story close properly. Normandy, June 1944. The German 352nd Infantry Division is dug in at Omaha Beach. Fortified positions, interlocking machine gun nests, excellent fields of fire across open ground, textbook defense, and when American infantry reaches the bluffs, German fire discipline breaks down. Not because of tactics, but because the volume of incoming fire is too high to maintain aim shooting. Every American rifleman is semi-automatic. The suppressive fire from 8 men in a squad equals what would require a machine gun team on the German side. Documented in German after-action reports, European Theater, 1944. Germany tried to answer the M1. The Gewehr 43 semi-automatic, about 400,000 produced, against 5.4 million M1 Garands. The math of industrial warfare is not subtle. Now put that same rifle in the Pacific. Triple canopy jungle, engagement distances of 50 feet, not 500 yards. Banzai charges in the dark where the question is not suppressive fire across a hedgerow. It's whether you can reload before the next wave gets to the wire. The M1's advantages in open terrain, sustained engagement, squad fire and maneuver, those compress dramatically when the jungle compresses the battlefield. Marines weren't fighting the Army's war. They were fighting a knife fight in a greenhouse. And the M1 Garand, for everything it could do, for everything the German AARs confirm, was optimized for a different fight. Marines weren't wrong to notice that. They were wrong to let the observation delay adoption past 1942. But the underlying instinct was sound. By February 1943, Marine units staged for Tarawa were putting in allocation requests for 22,000 Garands per month. The same rifle the Corps had written off in 1938. The same rifle that wasn't on the dock at Guadalcanal. Still not enough. The requests kept coming. That is your receipt. Marines didn't hate the M1 Garand. They needed to fight their own war first to understand why it was right for theirs too. And the moment the evidence arrived from their own men, in their own terrain, they couldn't get enough. History tells you Marines were stubborn. The documents say something more interesting. They were rigorous. That's a better story. And now you have the receipt for it. If this is the kind of military history you want, primary documents, real receipts, no mythology, subscribe. Every video on this channel is built the same way. We just went deep on the Garand. Next video goes even darker. 10 rifle modifications the Army and Marine Corps officially banned in World War II, and the ordnance reports showing why soldiers kept using them anyway. Same sourcing, same approach, completely different story than you've heard. It's right here. I'll see you there.